ever and did a much better job of looking after the country than we have in 200 years, that's for sure. But these medicams, I think we've had 12 of these now, and started off in the hall, and then we drifted down here where it's kind of more contained. And really the mission of the Hemp Embassy is just to educate people. I mean, I thought I'd tell you briefly my story before I put Deb on, who wants to do a trivia quiz with you. You know, I was brought up conservatively. In the country, alcohol was the only drug I knew. That was kind of the culture. And I didn't get restless and start thinking until I was in my early 20s, went travelling. By accident, I discovered cannabis in Afghanistan, and it was a life-changing thing for me. It was a spiritual thing, as well as I was a migraine sufferer, and it basically stopped me getting migraines. So I was kind of fascinated by it, and it was not for another 10 years did I end up back in Nimbin, where I found there was a lot of other people who had discovered cannabis worked for them and they liked it. So we had, we're outlaws. It's no small thing to be a criminal, and really that's what we are. And jails now in Australia are full of people victims of the drug war, or the fallout from the drug war. And it took me a long time to realise that people who do like cannabis, like myself, that were drawn to live in this area with like-minded people, that people hide the habit. You lose your job if you put your hand up in mainstream and say, you use cannabis. You lose your job. Nowadays you lose your licence. And that's been a huge thing in our community. A lot of people have lost their licences. It's like, if you're a cop on the Lismore Road, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, drug testing drivers, because a huge percentage of people around here use cannabis regularly. And, I was lucky enough to be with my father the last, few years of his life, and he's just taking this smorgasbord of pills every day, which was a real education for me, and some of you will be too. And the more I studied prohibition and the effect of it, the more it's really quite simple, I reckon. I get annoyed by politicians who endlessly get up and say, there's no easy answer to the drug war, it's really complicated, It's really simple, I think. And it's actually just a war or a scrap over who's going to get the profits from relieving people's pain or making you feel good. Same thing, really. Pain relief is probably the best business on the planet. All the ancient old herbalist healers had lots of knowledge, and then the famous quackery that happened with different potions, and this was guaranteed to make you better. They're basically all full of opium or cannabis. There's been a few really good pain-relieving herbs in the creation, and humans worked that out a long time ago. They discovered cannabis, I think that we've got Australia's eminent historian here, John Jiggins, but certainly at least 5,000 years before Christ, I think there's some records.
Don't give away too many of me trivia.
No. You've got to remember these answers for her trivia quiz. Anyway, it's been around for a long time, and Jack Herer claims it was the most grown plant on the planet 200 years ago, before the cotton industry really became more economic, because it was easier to process. So here's this plant that's good for so many things and such an overall medicine. I think 100 years ago, when you went to the doctor, in order of popularity, the main thing they prescribed was opium, just across-the-board painkiller. Now we're just locking people up if they want to use that. Unless you do it through a pharmaceutical company and they own the patent and they make a little pill like Oxycontin, you're in jail. If you grow your own opium poppies, you're in jail. The second most popular remedy doctors gave out was alcohol. And the third most popular was cannabis. This is only 100 years ago. So it was in a lot of big money vested interest to actually make illegal these plants and move the whole medicinal world into a pharmaceutical channel where everything has to be tested with their triple-blind bypass or whatever. And herbs were outlawed. And there's there's dozens of illegal plants now because they're good medicines, because they're pain relievers, because it really is a fight in the business world over who's going to make all the profit. It's kind of fascinating if you can get, past being angry about it. And along with prohibition has come the industry of jails, which is massive now in Australia. You would have heard yesterday, we're just building more jails all the time. And the police. The police have got huge power in Australia. We're wealthy enough to have so many police to chase every trivial law. And I think roadside drug testing, driving with drugs in your system, especially cannabis, because it stays in your system for a month or so, is now shot right up to the top of drug charges not drug charges, criminal charges in New South Wales. So, we're trying to do something about that, and, we're going to have to raise money, I think, to do some legal challenge. But anyway, these medical seminars have really come about through lots of people coming to the embassy wanting to know more about medical cannabis. It's legal in more than half of America now. It just became legal in Canada last week, another Commonwealth country. England is starting to open up. Europe has already opened up, especially countries like Portugal and Spain. And then there's Uruguay, South America. So it's going to happen in the next few years in Australia. We are really conservative. And some credit to the police. New South Wales police are clearly using some discretion. So people who do want to try cannabis, no one's going to go to jail for trying it. You'd be very unlucky to even have to go to court, because there is some sympathy, and in New South Wales especially, we have a cautionable amount for 15 grams, which small amounts, they just give you a little ticket and you don't have to go to court. Driving is another matter, and no one wants to lose their licence, so I'm finding heaps of people don't want to even try it because you can lose your licence. But you'll hear from Deb and other people today, there are varieties or uses of cannabis where you don't get the psychoactive bit, but it's still possible you can come up in the driving drama. We've got someone from Mardi Gras who actually, they never smoke cannabis, use cannabis, but they are using CBD, and they tested positive at the police test. We go to court, we said to them, we guarantee lots of references, he never uses THC, and the court, they still want to charge him, and that's going on. So it's interesting. They've used drug driving as a massive baton to really hammer cannabis use. And I would think a lot of it's from the lobbying of the pharmaceutical industry. They stand to lose a lot of money if cannabis gets legal, because it's such a good overall herb. Anyway, different program today. Dr. Deb has come to quite a few of these talks.
Okay. Saved by the buzzer.
She's a medical doctor, and now also, you finished your herbalism courses just about?
God, no, got a little bit to go.
She's been studying herbalism as well. So she's got both sides of the coin, and above all, which I value the most, she's got experience. So I really appreciate her travelling down from Queensland, talking again.
Yes.
And she'll totally entertain you. Dr. Deb.
Even though you've given me the toughest gig, like first up on a Sunday morning, Michael. Just further to what Michael was saying though, an interesting fact about it being legalised around the world is Germany has sort of introduced medical cannabis. In their first year, they had 17,000 prescriptions. Australia? Well, that's one of my unanswerable questions in the trivia quiz. Any question that we consider unanswerable, you get double points for. Also, another interesting thing, there's that talking about the different states, is that New South Wales is actually a little more fortunate than Queensland. According to the cannabis arrests, Queensland is double New South Wales and Victoria. And all you southerners think we're so paranoid. Well, guess what? That's why we're paranoid. And 10 times more arrests in South Australia and Northern Territory. And that's what we face in Queensland. We also are faced with a narcissistic, sociopathic Queensland Health Department. So our big doc in Queensland is the worst in Australia. So, we regularly have terrible things happening, like children being taken off their parents for giving them medical cannabis. And you know, just ordinary sick people being dobbed in by whoever and being busted when they're sick and suffering. And that happens a lot in Queensland. But anyway, we're going to have something a little lighter this morning. Now, this is the inaugural Hemp Embassy Trivia Quiz. This is the first round. Now, it's open to everybody, but ultimately who'll probably be on the final will be the people who, you know, obviously know quite a bit about it. And in the Mardi Gras in 2020, we're going to have a big grand final. So every workshop, we're going to do a heat of the trivia quiz. And so the people in the audience who want to answer questions can. Like, it's open to everybody. But more than that, it really is a bit of a learning exercise as well. It's not going to be just a one-word answer and move on to the next question. There's so much debate, so much controversy. Everyone has their own opinions about things. Is that we can quite easily have a little mini discussion on the question if the audience so desires. So it's not in the format where we're going to just keep barreling on and, you know, keep asking questions. It's also a learning thing, because how many of you, it's your first time here? Yeah, so so it's just, you know, like the talk I gave yesterday was pretty heavy, so I thought we'd do something light this time. Now, have you got a pen and a piece of paper so we can write down people's names? Okay. And so if it's a really easy question, it's just one tick. If it's a difficult question or you have to give, you know, examples of things, you'll get a tick for each example that you give. And I will be ruffling through the questions because some of them are really quite expert questions that I would say for the final. But I didn't have time to actually sort them all out, so you'll just have to trust me. Okay. Let me see. Now, if anybody totally disagrees with me and says that I'm absolutely wrong, you just have to present me with references to prove me wrong by the end of the session. So, because as I said, there's a lot of controversy in this. Okay, first question. What substances most impair driving and why? Okay, Dolph?
Alcohol, because it's shit.
Okay, well, you get 1 point for Dolph so far. So do you know why? Yeah, what part of the brain? The cortex, but what it actually, and you, that lady there, you'll have to, her know she gets a point for that. So who can give me the part of the brain that alcohol affects?
All of it.
Yeah, well, okay. Okay, cerebellum, that's the part of your brain that's responsible for automated motor programs. And what actually happens with alcohol is that the connections between your cortex and your cerebellum become interrupted. So your cortex is saying to you, I can drive, and your cerebellum is saying, well, sorry, we can't. Which is the exact opposite with cannabis. Cannabis does not affect your cerebellum, it does not affect the connections between your cortex and your cerebellum.
Deb,
Yes?
what about the police? They affect my driving the most.
Well, you actually get 3 points for that, so you can write yourself down. Yep.
Thank you.
Well, it doesn't matter if you're a member of the... I mean, there's none of those sort of conditions in this competition. So, okay, so that's why, in actual fact, cannabis does not impair driving in any way the same way that alcohol does. It's because it affects the brain in an entirely different way. And really, the effect on your driving is much the same as when you lose concentration and forget where you're driving. How many of us have driven through roundabouts and driven kilometres and thought, I don't remember that, because you're thinking about something else? Yep. Well, that's pretty much what happens when you drive under the influence of cannabis. You'll cruise off and start thinking about the problems of the universe, and you think, oh dear, I don't remember stopping at that red light. But you've also avoided hitting the child that stepped out into the street. You've also avoided hitting the roo that's jumped into the road, because your cerebellum is still working fine. And even though your cortex is off listening to music or doing other things or solving the problems of the world, your cerebellum is still doing your automated driving program for you. And and the connections to the cortex are still fine, so that when you see an obstacle or something where you have to do evasive action or brake, you just do it. And I think most people with driving experience with cannabis would agree with that, wouldn't you? Is that even though you think you can't do it, in actual fact, when it boils down to it, you can. And that's just leaving all the legal aspects out of it, by the way. That's just strictly talking about drugs. And okay, so this question is still open. What other substances most impair driving?
Valium.
Yes. Who said that? Okay, so there's a point over there, Valium or benzodiazepines. For the same reason as alcohol. They disrupt your cerebellum. They act and they take away your sense of caution, like you just don't, all your reflexes are slower, all that sort of stuff. The things that least impair driving are the things they test for. Amphetamines have been known to improve driving skills in moderate doses, and the same with ecstasy in moderate doses. So the very things they test for are in fact the things that are safest. Not that I'm condoning driving impaired by any drug, but we're looking at this as a whole thing. Okay, question 1 complete.
See, it wasn't that...
Yes?
Can we just get some clarification? When you're talking cannabis as a whole, not the CBD or the medical...
Yeah, I'm just talking about cannabis as a whole plant ingestion, whichever way you do it, that contains THC, CBD. I mean, as we know, even if you're just taking CBD, there's enough THC in it to still trigger the very sensitive tests that they use. But that's not talking about impairment. And the way you get impaired with cannabis is by having the psychoactive component, which is THC. So that's what we're talking about here, is when, you know, you've had enough of any drug to feel impaired, how are you going to go driving? Well, the ones they test for are actually the ones that are least impairing of all. So, and I think that's why we're also angry about the drug testing, because they brought it out as a means of controlling impairment on the road, and it's not for that at all. It's just to detect illicit substances. So now that's exactly what they're charging you with, and not driving impairment, so they've got around that one. But that was something I also thought was pretty disgusting, was, you know, at least be honest about why you're doing it. Okay, next question. I'm dropping them all over the place here. Okay, name 3 conditions that cannabis can treat involving the musculoskeletal system. Okay? Well, that's actually the nervous system. So we're talking about the muscles and bones and things like that. Okay, it was that person over there. That's one, so a point for her, and you have to get a name. Okay. Okay, next one. The lady in the blue. MS, yes. Even though that is a nervous one as well, it has massive effects on the musculoskeletal system, so we'll pass that one. I suppose seizures do too. We should give her a point too. And that's also another nervous system one. Okay, we'll pass those ones. See, I've got to be more careful how I phrase the questions. Dog? No, dog. That is not musculoskeletal. I can twig the other ones in there, but no point for dog. And one more answer. Parkinson's? Yeah, we said Parkinson's down the front. Though that's another nervous system one, but it does have massive effects on your musculoskeletal system, so we'll pass that one. So just make sure Disco Sister gets your names so that you can get a point. Yes? Yes, I'll pass that one too, though that one's also a nervous system one.
Just straight out pain, muscle pain.
Absolutely. Straight out pain. Yep. So you get another point. Okay. How are you going with all this recording the points?
I think I'm just randomly writing things down and we'll find them.
Okay. Even though this guy over there, what's your name? Frank. Frank's doing well. I think he might get a spot on the finalist panel. Yes, doll.
Broken heart.
That's cardiovascular. And actually, there is such a thing as broken heart syndrome. It really does exist. Okay, we'll leave that one.
Next question.
Okay, how does, I'll say the whole plant, it's got the roots here, but I'll say the whole, how does the cannabis plant clean up the soil? Oh, yes?
Bioremediation.
Absolutely. Give that lady... Now, if you can explain to the rest of the people what bioremediation is, you get 3 points.
It takes the contaminants out of the soil into the plant.
That's right, and so that's why your first crop of hemp in anywhere you grow here should be discarded. Very good. So 3 points for that. What else? Now, okay, I'll continue with that. Who can give me 3 different contaminants? Okay, Dov?
Lead.
That's one.
Arsenic.
Well, we can group all those into heavy metals. Okay, what besides heavy metals?
Roundup.
Yeah, pesticides. Yep, or herbicides in that case. One more. Okay, I'll give you a clue. These things can make humans sick too. Bacteria, yeah, or fungi. Now, mind you, having said that, there's a lot of really good bacteria that you need, especially for indoor organic growing. That's actually how you do it indoors, is by using good bacteria. But there's also what we call pathogenic bacteria that can be contaminants. So, like with our gut, the soil needs a balance as well. Okay, so yeah, you see, so these members of the audience, you know more than you think you do. Okay, here's a good one. Does cannabis cause schizophrenia? Anyone want to tackle that one here? Okay, the lady in the blue up the back. Okay, can you elaborate on that at all? Right, can anybody else, Dolph?
Yeah, so research shows over 100 years schizophrenia stayed the same, but over the same 100 years cannabis use has risen and dropped, and that's correlation, is not causation.
Absolutely, Dolph gets 3 points for that, because that basically puts it in a nutshell. The worldwide incidence of schizophrenia across all societies, all cultures, is 1%. It has remained that for as long as the numbers for schizophrenia have been recorded. And as Dolph said, the use of cannabis has risen and fallen, and there's more people using cannabis today than ever before. But the schizophrenia rate remains at 1%. So, as Dolph said, correlation does not mean causation. So I'll rephrase the question. Can cannabis trigger schizophrenia? Dolph, I'll let you take this one too. Yes, it can. Just the same as, for example, the first year of university is a known risk factor for triggering a first episode of schizophrenia, because the age of onset of schizophrenia most of the time is in the young adult period. So schizophrenia can be a trigger. Cannabis can be a trigger for schizophrenia, but you still really have to be in that 1% that's going to get it anyway. It can cause transient psychotic symptoms if you have a huge amount of it and if there's no CBD in it. If it's unopposed THC, you are far more likely to get some sort of psychotic response. And the other thing to remember is that back in the late 80s and 90s and into today, that hydroponic, and I put that in inverted commas, was what the weed became known as, and that's what the organised crime people have grown now for a few decades in Australia. And they've capitalised on the effect of unopposed THC without realising what they were doing, because by forcing up the THC and sacrificing the amount of CBD in the plant, they've created a situation where they have made an addictive drug out of THC, because that's what happens if you use it unopposed. It has far more chance of causing paranoia, anxiety and psychotic episodes. And it's also what has created that thing about the stoner, the person who just smokes day in, day out, because that's what hydroponic weed does. And this is what I observed over the years, was that for some reason they just kept smoking it. Like when ordinary, you'd have a smoke and then you'd wait a few hours, sometimes several hours, before you'd have another one. But with this hydroponic stuff, they just kept smoking it. 40, 60...
How much of that is tobacco?
That's with and without tobacco. That's both. I would say, yeah, I take your point, Gerald, but it's both. It's not just the tobacco that did that. So right from when I graduated, I was actually advising patients, look, if you've got to smoke your pipe, try and find bush. Don't smoke the hydro. But I didn't know why then, now I do. So that's why it got such a bad rap for supposedly causing schizophrenia. It was because really it was adulterated cannabis that has given the healthily grown, whether it's indoor greenhouse, outdoor, as long as it's grown organically and with chemical free, then you're going to get real cannabis. But when it's done the way the organised crime places do it, just for profit, and of course indica, for example, is a strain that is shorter, it has a higher yield and a shorter time to flowering, so it's very popular with recreational growers because they get more money out of it. And indica, by its very nature, is a more sedating type of, or the indica trait is more sedating, better for pain relief, better for sleep. But as a recreational drug, basically it just would, people just got really stoned and couch locked, and it's only really been in the last 5 years that the Australian public at all has managed to know what it's like to smoke a sativa strain that gives you energy and makes you giggle, like we had back in the 70s, when we had all sorts of different strains around. But then it just became all this tampered with indica shit that has hurt so many of our teenagers. So I hope that explains things a little better to those of you who don't know. As you can see, there's a bit of controversy. Gerald he reckons it's tobacco's the only thing, but it's not just tobacco. There's,
for when you the tug from tobacco is every 20 minutes.
Yes.
The tug from cannabis is every hour and a half.
Yes.
Roughly. So if you're mixing spin with your pipe, then if you're mixing tobacco with your pipe, then you're getting a tug from that to smoke it every 20 minutes.
Yeah, but then you could just go and have a cigarette though, if you had to, rather than go and have some more weed. Yeah, but I do take your point, so that definitely would be an element. But there's lots of people that didn't smoke it with spin and still have exactly the same thing, where they, they would just keep smoking it. And to you, they would appear really, really stoned, but they would say, no, I don't feel stoned. And that's sort of how it was tampered with, really. It really, ruined cannabis, that sort of thing. But we're getting it back. This is what medical cannabis has done for us. We're now getting much more used to much better quality cannabis, which is really great. And this is what the government, we've got to do this, we've got to prevent diversion to the streets. That's what we need to do, is divert medical cannabis to the streets so we can finally stamp out the organised crime black market shit. But of course, the government doesn't realise that. Okay, that's another question. How can industrial hemp be used in medicine?
Gross, what's the CBD?
Yes, CBD, a point there. John, yep. Got Dolph? Yep, absolutely, seeds for nutrients. So we have, whatever CBD does, the benefits from the seed. Anything else? Give you a clue, you use the whole plant.
Suppository.
I'd have a bit of trouble shoving a whole cannabis plant up my arse, I imagine, Dolph. It conjures up a wonderful mental image, though. What's something you've got to use the whole plant for? Juicing! You get another point. This lady's going to be on the final, I can see. And so basically, everyone got that one right. Okay. Now, Dolph, here you go, you can redeem yourself. Name 3 conditions that cannabis can treat involving the gastrointestinal system. You said it before. Piles. He gets the point now. So it's a point. Up the back there. Yes, parasites. Yes, it can. Except that the lady, what were you going to say behind there? So I'm sorry she gets the point for that, because she put her hand up first. And we'll do one more. Diarrhea, yep, there you go. You can also put in, you know, increasing appetite in that, of course, because that's gastrointestinal, isn't it? So, can anyone think of any more?
Bowel cancer.
Bowel cancer. That lady gets a point. She's a new one, had to write her name down. Okay, that'll do for that one. Now, this will be one that create a bit of debate, and I think you'll get a point as long as you can justify your answer in some way. What is the average THC content of modern cannabis available on the illicit market? Gerald?
I reckon the average would probably be about 6%.
On the illicit market?
On the illicit market.
Okay. Oh, I don't know. What do you reckon, Dolph?
So average just THC?
Just THC, yeah.
Yeah, between 12 and 24.
Yep. Over the back there? 15. Okay, well, I would have to say no to a point for Gerald there, because even what you're getting in the illicit market is usually topping 10%, but will not often reach 15%. And Dolph, by giving the widest variance, you get 2 points, and the other person who said 15 gets 1 point. Because basically, if you talk to the Cannabis Cup winners in the States, I mean, they're pushing 35% THC. I don't think we need it that high, I mean, if anyone's smoked any weed that's about between 20 and 25% THC, you're stoned for a very long time. So, yeah, the average on the street would be probably between 10 and 15%. People that are doing indoor organic can easily push it up to 25%. Outdoors, I would like a comment on that one. What do you reckon you can push outdoors or greenhouse up to safely without sacrificing too much CBD? What do you reckon, Malcolm?
I actually took cuttings from my plants, so I knew all the varieties, and the stuff that I grew outside was bloody twice as strong as the stuff I grew inside.
There we go. So Malcolm can get a point for that, because this argument will wage on for time immemorial as to the best way to grow weed. I reckon as long as it's clean and it has got in it what you want it to have in it, and it's organically grown, I don't think it matters where it's grown. Medical cannabis, if you're looking at it from a good manufacturing practice point of view, quality control and all that sort of stuff, then obviously indoor organic gives you the most control. But then, as Malcolm will attest, you lose the benefits of natural sunshine. So who knows, maybe greenhouse is the best way to go to for both quality control and nature. And that will be a controversy that will rage on for years, I'm sure, as to the best way to grow it. But as long as it does what you want it to do with no harm, then that's all we want, really, isn't it? Okay, when was I'll say marijuana for this question, because it's a historical question, so luckily the palettes aren't here. I'd be stoned on stage, and I don't mean cannabis stoned. When was marijuana officially made illegal for non-medical use in the United States?
1937.
Okay, you get the point.
California, 1915, 16.
Give
so
him
you
a-
don't specify various states, like
Yeah.
California's first.
Yeah, okay, he gets 2 points for that. He went beyond the call. Here's the nutrition question. What fatty acids are generally considered... Omega-6 fatty acids are generally considered to be pro-inflammatory. So we all know about omega-3 that you get from fish oil and how it's anti-inflammatory and all that sort of stuff. Well, omega-6 can actually work in the opposite direction and become pro-inflammatory. But why is this not the case with the levels of omega-6 that you find in the seed of the cannabis plant? Doc?
It was made specifically for humans.
Now that's a very esoteric answer to the question, but we need a little more scientific fact.
Because it's balanced, it's got the other omegas with it.
Absolutely. This lady gets a point. The ratio of the omega-3, omega-6 and a little bit of omega-9 as well is in actual fact the ratio that's very close to what's in our cell membranes. And our cell membranes are actually made up of a lipid layer, and without that, no receptors or neurotransmitters or hormones or chemicals can work. So if we don't have a healthy cell membrane, we don't have a healthy body. And the endocannabinoid system not only works via that cell membrane receptor sort of thing everywhere, but it actually plays a part in maintaining our cell membranes. So it actually, that's what's so amazing about this plant, is that, okay, the endocannabinoid system is there to balance everything and to make sure all these receptors are working properly and doing what they should be doing, and the plant provided us with its own way of protecting that and for keeping our endocannabinoid system healthy. Like, what more do you want in a plant? It's just amazing. Anyway, okay, I've run out of the... Oh no, hang on, there's one on the floor. I don't know how we're going for time. We'll probably have to get our finalists up here in a minute. Okay, I might disqualify you from this question. Cannabis has been used for rituals throughout ancient history and is found in cults around the world, including use by ancient Jews and early what?
Chinese.
No. Okay, John, you want to answer it? Christians. This probably came from your book, did it? That one?
I have questions about this. It comes from a book called Green Gold by Lynn Osborne and someone, Bennett.
Yep.
There's a big debate about whether it is or not, but I won't go into it.
No, well, I have my own belief that, in actual fact, it was always frankincense, myrrh and cannabis. That they replaced it. They replaced the gold, with gold because of the church and everything, and because it just makes so much more sense, because they're all like a resinous type of extract that was used for healing. So it makes much more sense that the wise men would have carried cannabis, frankincense and myrrh. Why would they want gold? They weren't capitalists back then. The gold would have meant nothing to them. So anyway, but that's just an aside. Yes, Dog?
They used to use it for, basically they'd rub...
Yeah. There was salves.
This is what it's argued, is that it was sort of rubbed in oil, and the Christians had this particular ritual where they would anoint you with oil. And I've got a friend who's trying to write a book called Mary Magdalene, Messiah of Marijuana, which is going to be arguing that, Mary Magdalene was the one who did it because, it's the women who did the sort of things like anointing with oil in the Christian movement.
Yeah, so we'll keep on with another history question. So you're disqualified again for the moment. In 2003, a basket filled with cannabis leaf fragments and seeds was discovered with a 2,500 to 2,800-year-old mummified shaman in what country? China, yes, Malcolm. He gets the point. So this one's so fascinating is that, you're probably right, they probably did find it in Tibet as well, with this particular question. Okay, let's see. I think we'll have a couple more questions for the audience and then we'll get our high scorers up here and I'll be asking a few more difficult questions for them. Can cannabis cause addiction?
No, it cures it.
Well, Dolph? It can. How can it?
Because if you're already an addicted personality, you need something to be addicted to.
That's exactly right. Now, on the whole, the risk of cannabis dependency is far less than most other addictive substances that we know of, but there will still be around, it's less than 10%, but there will still be around 10% of people that will become dependent on it. Not physically, which is the way you become dependent on opioids primarily, but with psychological dependence. And as Dolph says, if you happen to have that sort of addictive personality, then it can become a dependence. Having said that, it is still a far better exit drug than gateway drug. And if you have to be dependent on something, then I think there's much worse things that you could be dependent on. It just depends whether that dependency has negative effects on your life or not. And for a lot of people, that dependence probably boils down to medicinal use anyway. So, do we call someone who's on psych drugs for bipolar dependent on their drugs because it makes them function better? So there is an argument to say how much of the cannabis dependence is actually medicinal use, which is treating their psychiatric disorder as well. So again, this is another one where there's more than one correct answer, and there's no real, the controversy again will rage.
But how can there be a controversy when the women body needs cannabis to maintain homelessness?
Well, it doesn't necessarily need exogenous cannabis. What it does need is enough food as medicine in their diets to maintain a healthy endocannabinoid system that will keep your own. There's some people that are just really lucky to be born with a great endocannabinoid system, and those people probably don't smoke weed because they're just really lucky to have been born with a great endocannabinoid system. But many more of us, because of our dependence on processed and refined foods, we're no longer getting those substances that will act on our cannabinoid receptors, and those substances like the ratios of omega-3 and 6 that are required to keep our cell membranes healthy. There are other plants in the plant world that contain cannabinoid-like substances which attach to cannabinoid receptors. So even if you say, oh, we lived in there was no cannabis there then and they didn't eat any hemp or didn't how can theirs be healthy? Because there were lots of other foods. Hops, for example. So hops is in the same family as cannabis. And hops has traditionally been used in beer making. And it's used in herbal medicine as quite a potent nerve and sedative. So that would have been something that a lot of regions would have had in their diet. So they would have protected their endocannabinoid systems that way. But when we removed most of the whole plant foods from our diet, we also removed that ability to maintain our endocannabinoid systems. Does that make it a bit clearer? Does that make sense to everyone? So because that was the question I asked myself, well, you know, not every region in the world had access to a cannabis plant to keep their endocannabinoid system healthy, so how did they do it? But herbal medicine's given me that answer, is that there's, you know, it's not the only plant in the world, it's just one of the best ones. Yes, Dol?
Cannabis plants like cannabinoids, so your endocannabinoid system matches, so it's like you said, it could be inherited. So if your mum was a big pot smoker and she had a full functional BCS, then popped you out of the baby, you'd have that head start.
That's a really interesting sort of statement, Dolph. He was just saying that, you know, if the pregnant mother, you know, sort of smoked a lot of weed or had a really healthy endocannabinoid system, then that would get passed on to her baby. And now, you know, traditionally Orthodox medicine would say that's a terrible thing.
And whether the child is breastfed or not. Too.
Yeah, whether the child is breastfed. So this will be a really interesting thing that will happen over the next couple of decades, because anything to do with pregnancy and babies, of course, it's really hard to do trials on and stuff like that, and I understand the problem that science has with that. But the fact remains is that the safety of cannabis has been established for thousands of years, and it's been used in pregnancy, infancy, breastfeeding for thousands of years. And there's really no evidence that it does any damage. So as a health professional, you know, I am supposed to say to you, it's contraindicated in pregnancy and but I can't. Like, that's just bullshit. Really it is. I mean, if you've got someone who smoked hydro through their whole pregnancy with unopposed THC, then yeah, you're going to probably have a baby that comes out with withdrawal symptoms from THC because there's no CBD there. But that's a different thing. And if it was legalised and we had our home grow and we knew where our pot was coming from and our medicines were coming from and all of this, then it wouldn't be a problem, because when you're pregnant, you wouldn't smoke anything that would endanger your fetus, you know. So you would go for high CBD things while you're pregnant because that would be better for your baby and things like that. So, you know, and I'm sure there's plenty of people in Nimbin who never gave up their pot while they were pregnant. Yeah, and I mean, the Jamaican study is showing that these kids are even more intelligent, you know, so, so there has been one longitudinal study done in Jamaica which has showed no adverse effects from the use of cannabis in pregnancy whatsoever. As a matter of fact, only improvements in social behaviour, believe it or not, and intelligence. So, and that's a very small study and you wouldn't want to draw any permanent conclusions from that. But let's just say there's a lot worse things you can do when you're pregnant. Okay, one more question, and then we'll see who our finalists are. Okay. So here we've got a question. We'll see if the audience can get this one. What type of extracts typically have a higher concentration of THC than the flowering bud of the plant? Oil, a point for that lady. And? Hash. Oh, Malcolm, you're not a... You cheated. Go on, give Malcolm a point. Yeah, hashish. I'll have to have another question now. Okay, what did cannabis ruderalis originally refer to?
Well, it was the...
Yeah, you can answer.
Well, it's sort of... it's the plant which is supposedly the origin of cannabis sativa, and it's a sort of wild, weedy sort of plant of Eurasia, which was sort of studied by the Russians. Is that... That's
correct. We now call it the third species of cannabis. So we have cannabis sativa, cannabis indica, and cannabis ruderalis. You're right, it originated in Eurasia and was typically just a weedy sort of bushland species. And mainly its use in modern hybrid times has been to reduce the size of the plant and in order to so you can fit more plants in an area, because apparently the yield wasn't really affected. So it has been crossed occasionally to try and find, as a recreational hybrid type situation. But on the whole, has always been considered sort of like the poor cousin of the other two. All right. So have we got our three finalists? Who's got the most ticks?
Well, I think Dov would be one of the winners.
Yeah.
I like to think Don here is also up in the running. Malcolm, the lady at the bottom of the row in the front.
I think so. I think this lady deserves
a spot on the panel.
Yes. And what about the lady at the end of the wall?
And okay.
You can come up.
And Dov.
Representation too.
And Gerald, you were actually surprisingly quiet.
I answered one, but I got it wrong apparently.
Oh, well, you can't let that beat you down, mate.
No, that's all right.
You've got to spring back.
No, that's all right.
But we've got other heats coming up. I'm expecting you at the grand final.
From my own experiments, I was right.
Yeah. And and also, doesn't mean there's no absolutes in this game, really. All right, so we probably need another chair, don't we? Hang on, I'll just...
The experts answered more questions. I think our amateurs I think they deserve an extra round of applause, because I think they did really well. And it's not an absolute, so there's room for a little bit of negotiation. And thank you very much. It's been really entertaining having you here doing this today, and I even let you eat your breakfast. Yep, so, and you'll be coming to Mardi Gras then, won't you, in 2020?
If I'm still here.
Yeah, well, I could say the same thing, I suppose. Yeah, anyone who's on a cancer journey learns to measure their future in 6-month blocks. Yeah, it's like that. All right, Michael, do we think that the first inaugural trivia quiz was a success? Yay! There we go. And thank you to all of you guys. Thank you, Malcolm and Dolph too.
Thank you,
and John,
Dr.
for coming up here and just being really helpful with it. Because it does, see, that's what I said, that's why I wanted to do it, not as a strict quiz format, but as another learning exercise. Have you all learned something new? Yay, that's what we wanted. Okay, now I can go out and finish my coffee.
So thanks to Dr. Deb. Thanks very much. You're a champion. She's a winner. Dr. Deb Waldron. I'll never get rid of this competition now.